From Western Michigan University, this is We Talk. Today's program is part of the We Talk Fall 2020 series. The purpose of We Talk programming is really to foster a campus culture of responsible and respectful civic and political engagement. Individuals and organizations taking part in these programs hope to elevate our discourse. It's critically important to listen and learn from thoughtful people with fundamentally different opinions. In these turbulent times, universities have a unique responsibility. WMU can set an example by fostering a culture of respect for viewpoint diversity. The quest for knowledge can thrive when we open our minds to engage in difficult conversations. Our students, faculty, and staff have come together to provide this series in just that spirit. Welcome to today's program.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our We Talk event on social justice at WMU, past, present, and future. My name is Emma Barada, and I'm the Vice President for Political Affairs for the Western Student Association, and I'll be serving as one of the moderators for today's event.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dalia Sanchez. I'm the VP of Diversity and Inclusion for the Western Student Association, and I will be your other moderator for today.
So the Western Student Association has teamed up with We Talk to bring you a conversation focused on the history of social justice and race relations at WMU. We Talk's goal is to foster civil discussions about topics that can be difficult. As our Graduate Student Association President Craig Morris said at the inaugural We Talk event back in February, he said, "We must get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And as part of our academic journey, we must learn about and acknowledge our own history of the inequity and the injustice at Western Michigan University. We can also learn how to advocate for meaningful change from the students and faculty that preceded our time on campus. We can use this conversation as a catalyst to unify the student body to advocate and advance for change. In a country where racial inequities are ingrained in virtually every system, we must recognize and challenge our own institution to be better so that future students are not having these same conversations and fighting these same battles for justice that we are still fighting today." Our alumni panelists are here today to connect with current students and share their experiences and wisdom from their struggles at WMU from 1968, 1990, and our current students today.
Racial injustices and inequities did not stop with these demonstrations. Instances of blatant racism and systematic inequities still exist in our campus today. Diversity and inclusion is stated as one of the founding core values of Western. How are we upholding these values today? We have to ask ourselves how our values are demonstrated in the principles and standards of behaviors, actions, classes, and practices at WMU. Our true values go beyond words. We have demonstrated these through behaviors and actions. Our amazing alumni panelists and our students, our panelists for us today, have showed these values and are here to speak on them today. Our conversation is a great opportunity to discuss strategies and successes on how to organize and make our student voices heard. We hope to empower our students and work together so that our university can be held accountable for their actions and their overall environment that they provide for our students. Together, we can work to create a better university for our students.
When Dr. King Jr. visited our campus 57 years ago, he said, "We are challenged after working in the realm of ideas to move out into the arena of social action, to work passionately and unrelentingly to make racial justice a reality." This reality certainly has not been realized, and today we have to pick up the torch as students and recognize that we still have a long journey ahead. Today we're here to talk, but from here we have to act to make WMU a better and more equitable place for all students. We invite you to participate in our conversation today. We want this to be as inclusive as possible, so there is a link in the YouTube description for a poll everywhere where you are able to submit your own comments and questions as you're listening, and our panelists will be able to see them and address them. So please feel free to participate. We would love to hear from all of you watching.
So with that, we would love for our panelists to all introduce yourselves. Please give us your name, your affiliations, your titles, any other key information you would love for the audience to know about yourselves.
We can go ahead and start with Tanya.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to We Talk. Special thanks to Emma and Dahlia for organizing this program. I am Tanya Bellamy, since she already said we're starting with Tanya Bellamy. I retired in June of 2019 after 36 and a half years of experience at Western. I started as a student in 1980. I served 10 years in the custodial department. I served for 10 years in the human resources department, and I served for 10 years in the Lewis Walker Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnic Relations because of my passion for race. I am currently serving as the co-lead for the Narrative Change Design Team for the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Kalamazoo. Thank you.
And we can go to Umar next, since you are together.
All right. My name is Umar Abdul Mutta Khalim. I worked at Western Michigan University for about 47 years. I left as the Director of Labor Relations. I, of course, am a Bronco, both my bachelor's degree, which I obtained way back in 1970, as well as my master's in public administration. Joined the Army after graduating because I was an ROTC, had an obligation. Stationed in Turkey, came back and got my master's and worked at Western, and I am now retired, thankfully.
We can go to Sam next.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Again, thanks for inviting me here. My name is Samuel Robinson. I just graduated in the spring. I'm a COVID grad. I was over there in Brown Hall most of my time at Western as a public relations communications person. And I spent 3 really great years with the Western Herald, covered men's and women's basketball, spent time as sports editor before becoming the editor-in-chief of the Western Herald last year. Still in touch with the folks there. I'm now with MLive at the Kalamazoo Gazette. And I'm really excited to be here. I've covered a range of issues, specifically involving race and racism on campus. I've been in Kalamazoo since 2015, so glad to be here.
Thank you. And then last but not least, we'll go over to Josh.
Hi, my name is Josh. I'm a junior at Western. I'm political science major, sociology minor. I'm also the vice president to Omega Delta Phi Fraternity Incorporated and a fellow for Southpaw, Michigan.
Great. Thank you all for taking the time to introduce yourselves. And then we would just like to start off today by having Tanya and Umar speak a little bit to their experience at WMU, give us a little background on really the demonstrations that they worked on, what they worked on to protect the Africana Studies program, really what made their time at Western so significant.
Okay. All right, since I've got to go first. During my undergraduate period at Western Michigan University, which of course was in the 1960s, and aside from dodging the obvious dinosaurs that roamed the campus at that particular time, I was involved in the various student movements, especially the Black Action movement, which occurred approximately during probably my sophomore year. We had an influx of upward bound students who came from predominantly various inner city areas around the state of Michigan and beyond, really. The Black Action Movement was focused on the issues of the day as they involved Black college students. During the mid and late 1960s, the efforts on various college campuses was to make students aware of both our history, our cultural experiences, and our stance as far as being anti-discrimination, anti-racism. I participated in the 1968 student takeover of the then Student Center before it was named the Bernard Center. And I had the pleasure, really, of participating with the students, actually helping the students in the 1990 takeover of the administration building, again, based upon an event which at this particular time was involved faculty basically grabbing or accosting a student in a classroom. My experience at Western Michigan University was one in which it was a constant struggle in terms of discrimination, in terms that there was division between, of course, the faculty, staff, students. And in many cases, the failure of the administration to understand either the needs of either the faculty or the students, and a constant division between students and administration, in that the administration really ran the university as such as far as policies and rules, and those policies and rules were basically that which was discriminating against both staff, students, as well as in terms faculty. Of course, realizing the faculty have a union, the students did not, except the students were probably better organized than the staff, especially. I participated in a number of staff initiatives as far as employment, as far as discrimination, as far as hiring and firing are concerned. Your turn.
Thank you, Umar. So I started at Western as a student in 1980, but I became a full-time employee in 1983, and I joined the Black Caucus, and that's where I met Umar. And so my experience with the Black Caucus was very interesting, as I learned that there are actually faculty and staff willing to work to deal with the issues of the day. At that time, the issues had to do with pay for employees. And then, let's see what happened. I became full-time, I said in 1983, and then I had graduated with a bachelor's degree by 1990, and I was actually working for Umar. And Umar was serving as the advisor to the Young Black Male Support Network. And those students, the Young Black Male Support Network, worked with about 150 other students, and they became the Committee for Solidarity and Accountability. And so the students decided to occupy the administration building, which was, it was a good idea because it made the university's administration change its basis for operations. They had to move out of the administration building into the Bernhardt Center. And so that brought urgency to the issues that the students brought as issues that they demand solutions to. And so, as you can see, in 1968, it was Black students, Black Action Movement. By 1990, we had collaboration, we had solidarity. It was not just Black students in that administration building. I supported them, I fed them. I brought food and snuck it in through the window so that they could eat, so that they needed nutrition to come up with some good demands. Number one demand was that the students receive amnesty for taking over the building. Another demand was for, well, they wanted something to happen to the faculty who accosted the student. They also wanted changes to the housing policy. They also wanted some changes having to do with sustainability on campus. Most of those demands were met. Another demand was the objective of the Walker Institute. At that time, it was the Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnic Relations. It had formed, but it didn't have a director and it didn't give clear objectives. So the students asked for clear objectives of that Race Institute. The university announced the clear objectives, and then it failed to support financially those objectives. So in my experience has been the institution will respond when there's an issue, and then they will pull back funding later. So in 1968, the Africana Studies Department was one of the demands, and that was, we did receive the Africana Studies Department up until about 2000, I think it was 2011. The university suspended the Africana Studies Department. By that time, I was in the Lewis Walker Institute. And so as a graduate of Western, I received a bachelor's degree, had taken classes in Africana Studies. I saw the need for it. So I fought for the reinstitution of Africana Studies. I worked with, actually we received funding from the Kellogg Foundation. The W.K. Kellogg Foundation gave the university $2 million to do racial healing work. Well, out of that $2 million, we received $15,000 to advocate for the return of the Africana Studies Department. We did that, but we were only successful because it was faculty, staff, and students working together. And in order for the College of Arts and Sciences dean to review the matter seriously, we had the help of the Western Student Association. So I learned from that instance that without the students, the faculty, and the staff working together, it's difficult to make change. I created a whole timeline of how the university, at one time would, for example, they instituted they gave the Walker Institute or the Institute for Race and Ethnic Relations funding and staff. And then by 2007, they were considering taking it away. And then I joined the Walker Institute in 2008. I went from a professional position to a clerical position in order to help save the Walker Institute. I don't have a cape. I'm not trying to be Superwoman. I just was trying to do what was right, I thought, for the institution, for the alumni, as well as the future of the organization. I saw what happened to Nazareth College. If you drive to Nazareth and Gull Road right now, there's nothing there because now it's rubble. I don't want to see that happen to Western Michigan University. So it's important to me that Western make the necessary changes that meet the cultural and historical needs of the current and future students, faculty, and staff, so that not just stay in business, but to continue to educate people and continue to be a beacon for the Kalamazoo community. I hope I guess that's all I would say.
No, thank you both for your context. This helps our audience to at least put together the pieces and have some background to now have this conversation moving forward. So starting with the question to everyone on the panel, what does social justice mean to you and what does it look like on a college campus? If one of our student panelists wants to start, maybe Josh, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so for me, what social justice looks like is putting in the work for tomorrow. And what I mean by that is that we work hard right now to attain that justice so that our kids and our younger siblings may come to Western or whatever institution and experience that kindness that we weren't given. And when it comes to social justice and what that looks like, it can take any form really, whether it's protesting on your campus, organizing sit-ins, um, I forgot what I was gonna say, but and there's online activism as well. Keeping your faculty accountable, talking amongst yourselves and organizing with each other are all forms of social justice in ways.
Totally agree. I feel like a huge component of it is action, and you kind of got to pass it forward and make sure that, you reach a hand back and bring others with you. Does anybody else have a response that they'd like to share? No? Yes, no. If not, we can continue moving forward. With the historical context that we received from Tanya and Umar, what can you guys take from that historical context to be applied to future social justice endeavors?
I'll go ahead and interject here to say I think you guys put it very well in context of when you were growing up and at Western in Kalamazoo here, and I think just that idea of being someplace for 4 years, right, or 5 years, 5.5 years, 6.5, 7 for some folks, but recognizing that you're going to be in a space for however many years, what you do can either be passed on, right, or it can stay in those 4 years. And I think the most successful folks, just referencing you guys here, going back in the 90s and working with the students, going back in the early to mid 2000s there in 2011, talking about the Africana Studies program. It's really important to stay in contact with some apparatus of a community that you've been a part of, and I think that's been the most successful. When we're talking about making having movements that create actual change, it's that there were people that were spanning multiple generations of trying to enact that change that then comes and then actualizes.
I think a good takeaway as well is seeing what they did was what was successful in their actions, and learning from that. And you've seen already what works. So if you come across an issue that's similar to that, to reproduce that same kind of situation. I think the most important part there was how everyone on campus worked together for an important cause. I think nowadays, at least any kind of social justice actions that I've been a part of, there's been some step of that missing. It's either there's been students and faculty or students in WSA, but there's never been all three in one organization. And I think coming to that reach and coming to that circle is important for the actions that we have today.
For sure. I feel like you guys all have a lot to say about these topics. When looking at that historical context, and even from a student standpoint, your own personal perspective and experience at Western, what barriers have you guys encountered throughout your time working in social justice and equity? Were there personal barriers, systematic barriers? What did you find, and then how did you get through those barriers? For our students, this would be more of a personal-based thing, and then for our panelists, maybe like Tanya and Umar, if you guys want to speak from past experiences.
I guess I'll start on this. For me, I guess it's like there's that wall. There's always that wall that's there in front. And in my experience at Western, has been running into that wall over and over and over again until I bust through it. And that's like, in my personal experience, that's the only way to do it at Western. A good example would be like dealing with Bronco Express on Western's camp. I always feel like as a student, talking to them on the phone or in person, they've never taken me seriously. And so in that kind of situation, I've always just continued going back and going back and going back until they realize I'm not leaving until this problem is solved. And that's kind of the same way when it comes to working in social justice. Like, you can't leave a problem alone and expect it to get solved, or else you're going to see the same kind of results happening over and over again. And so that just requires hitting that wall over and over again. And it hurts. It's not fun. But the progress that you make, and when you finally break through that wall, the reward that's there is worth all the pain and all the effort that you've gone through to achieve that goal.
I agree with Josh and had that experience of there was an illusion when I arrived on campus that if I finish my degree and I do everything right, that life would be grand, and that it didn't turn out to be true. And so I saw the inequities clearly at Western when I worked as a human resources representative. I got to look at everything, the rules and how those rules were being applied to different employee groups, to the executives versus the custodians. I got to see where a lot of the skeletons were hidden. And at that time, I think I became woke. Before that time, I thought that if you just worked hard and you followed the rules, you could get justice. And then I started to see that, no, that's not how it works. It has to do with your influence. Influence comes in numbers, and most of those numbers have a $sign in front of them. So I didn't have money, so it was best for me to establish relationships with different people across campus. And I did that in order to impact change. The number one change I was never able to impact was, after I was able to get green cards for faculty members, there was some discrimination in the whole immigration process, and I was not able to deal with that. So I tried to focus on the issues that had to do with, that I thought had to do with race. And so I'm really proud of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. It was through that office that I was able to join the Everyone Counts learning community. And there is where I was able to unpack a lot of issues that I was not aware of, that were like microaggressions, all the things that I had seen from the HR point of view. I was able to really see how they impact everyone. not just Blacks, but how the inconsistencies and the lack of inclusion not just impacted Black people on campus, it impacts everyone on campus. And so shout out to Martha Warfield, shout out to Candy McCorkle for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion that I gave me my wings, gave me the knowledge I needed to do the social justice work that I'm still doing today.
Yes, thank you for your guys' responses. When thinking of social justice, what does it look like on a college campus to you? And I feel like we should have everybody's opinions because I feel like everybody has a lot of different ideals and perspectives on how the campus should look. So if we could start with maybe Sam, and we can work our way through Josh and Tanya and Umar.
Yeah, in terms of movements, obviously, I mean, Western students that are watching this right now are, I guess, in the know or are privy to what, when something happens on campus, right? And we've seen it happen on our campus. We've seen it happen on University of Michigan's campus, Michigan State University's campus. We've seen different events, like cultural significant, like, oh my gosh, did you see this? Oh my gosh, did you hear this happened? Oh my gosh. So like when you talk about social, anything in the word social, I'm just thinking of talking to people and my role covering people, talking to people at Western Michigan. The idea of social activism has taken on so many different forms, whether it's going to the side and asking it, telling a teacher, hey, like, I don't feel comfortable with the way that you are, maybe the student in this classroom, whether it's sending an email to a provost or a dean or a, head of a college or a department, whether it's, the student association or organization formally takes a position or a stance and asks for a demand in writing, right? We've seen that on campus here at Western the last few months. But for me, getting back to your actual question of what does social justice look like, it just looks like me being able to go to a certain place and not like be, as Tanya put in, microaggressed upon, as a person of color, every single day that we interact with non-people of color, we have this, I guess there are psychologists and social scientists that could describe the feeling better than I could. But moments of uncomfortability that attending a predominantly white institution, you're going to have those. There's no way to get around that, and that will be. I mean, that's to my understanding so far, 23 years on this earth, it is a humanistic in nature to just other people and to differentiate. So it's going to be hard to undo ourselves of that as a community, as a campus. But yeah, that's what it's looked like to me, I suppose.
For me, social justice on campus. So one of the things I was thinking about is how people think what social justice should look like. When people talk about that, they expect huge acts of activism, protesting, and that kind of thing. But social justice can come down to the littlest of things, whether it's you see a classmate uncomfortable or being verbally accosted by whether it's another student or a professor on something and standing up for them, whether it's that you take a look at your syllabus and you notice the wording or something just doesn't look right or looks uncomfortable to you. And in all, social justice on campus, for me, what it is standing up for my fellow students, especially my fellow students of color. I think that a lot of us are uncomfortable and just don't want to stand out because, as Tanya said, we're here to get our degrees, and we think that after we get our degrees, we're gonna be set, So we just want to go through college without any of those bumps. And I think that realizing that those bumps are going to happen, no matter whether it's in university or it's going to be at your job or it's going to be at Starbucks, like they're going to happen. So for me, it's taking that proactive action and just addressing it right in the moment, to just nip it in the bud, as you would say.
Social justice. In the 1960s, we realized, I guess I shouldn't say realized, I think everyone understood that we were striving for justice, period. And as a college student, becoming aware of what was going on around me was essential to understanding what justice would look like, or would perhaps even feel like, in terms of being able to state my mind, state what I wanted to state, just campaign for the truth. When I went into the Army, of course, there wasn't a whole lot of social justice in the United States military. But I had a unique experience because I was stationed in the country of Turkey for almost 2 years. And at that particular time, of course, Turkey was a dictatorship, a hardcore dictatorship. Everyone considers it a dictatorship now, but it was actually under a military style dictatorship at that particular time. And of course, the people didn't have that kind of transparency. When I became Muslim, we actually had to meet at night with the curtains drawn in order to talk about or even discuss the ability for me to come into the faith of al-Islam. When I came back to the United States, we were still facing basically the same problems. By the time I came back to campus, we were facing the same problems that I had left in the 1960s. Again, transparency. When we start talking about institutions, we start talking about, from the African-American perspective, institutional racism. But when we as students, or you as students now, look at the institution that we refer to as the university is part of the overall institutions, and there are systemic things that you want to do, that you want to accomplish. But one thing that we always want to try to remember is that in order to impact any particular system or institution, we have to try to put ourselves in some position to maintain a relationship with that institution so that we can impact or speak to that particular institution in order to gain some type of transparency. And sometimes that transparency, or the demand for the transparency, is going to be external. Sometimes it's going to be internal if you're still a student, or you're a faculty member or a staff member. But we can impact it if we have that connectivity to it, to actually speak to it, or truth to power type situations. It's difficult. It's not going to be easy. You're going to get stoned at times. You're going to get run over. You could get beat down. But again, that comes with the territory when you're dealing with systemic problems, especially in large institutions, which normally have a lot more resources, a lot more money, whatever. But you got to keep at it. Never give up.
So for me, social justice on campus looks like everyone's needs being met, everyone being celebrated, supported, and valued. That was one of my issues. I never felt valued. No matter how hard I worked, how many people I worked for, how many late nights, how many events, weekend events, I never felt valued. And I think that when we continue to maintain society's status quo, that's a problem. And I finally realized that, there's this illusion of progress, because we are talking about the issues, we're addressing the issues. But if people aren't feeling celebrated, people are feeling valued, and I mean everyone, then there's a problem. When COVID decided to visit us last year, what did the institution do? It looked at the lowest people in its employee ranks and decided to eliminate those people. Did it look at the top? Did it look at the executives who've been there for longer than they should be there? There, as far as I'm concerned, too many lifetime appointments. And that's part of the issue. You're not going to get change if you have the same people in the executive positions for more than 15 years. So social justice on the campus may also look like ending lifetime appointments for some of the executives.
Thank you all for those responses. I want to go back to something. This is a question that we received in the chat, but I think that Josh touched on this actually a little bit earlier, is the idea of you have students who are pushing to make change on campus, but Josh kind of mentioned that there's a lot of times a disconnect, or there's a misstep, there's something that doesn't bridge the gap to getting you where you want to go, or to getting the students organized to make that change. So the question that we got from Poll Everywhere, this was directed towards Mimi and Umar, but I really feel like anyone can ask this question or could answer this question, is what consistencies have you seen and heard from students who are fighting for justice now versus when you were a student? Or essentially, what are the similarities between then and students now, or what are the differences that you see now, that whether those are positive or negative, that maybe are pushing us closer to change or that are inhibiting us from getting where we want to go?
I guess I'll start again. For me personally, I think what's prohibiting us is the lack of organization. Because when you go back to the 1960s, you see that a lot of students, doesn't matter if you were part of an RSO or a fraternity or sorority or any organization, you were all united behind one cause. I think now a lot of students look at it and they look at this group their job is to do that kind of stuff and to advocate for that, and they think it's being handled. When in actuality, it takes, the saying is, it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, in this sense, it takes all of us to push for this kind of change, to be united. It's a frustration that I felt when I've talked to students organized on Western's campus. And for me, like, the way I've always looked at it, doesn't matter your race or nationality or anything. This affects all of us. So why aren't we all on the same team when it comes to these kind of things?
One of the things that I learned, excuse me, after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and then going to a foreign country, you develop a degree of understanding of being a minority within a minority. One of the advantages I think that students have, an ability perhaps that many people in America do not have, is the access to education, the access to learning and especially reading, and then being able to apply what they have learned, what they've been exposed to. And that's very, very important. I can remember one of the first books that I was challenged with as a freshman was a book called The Ugly American. I really didn't have any depth of real understanding until I went to another country and realized that I was that ugly American. The things that I was taking with me, just as the things that I think now, as a former student, or you perhaps as current students, understand that you're going to take a lot of stuff with you. And how are you going to apply that stuff? Some of it's going to be positive, some of it's not going to be so positive, and whether or not you realize what needs to be changed within yourself and what you need to try to change within others, or again, attacking the system. I think that's very important because I think college students, especially, the old tip of the spear type situation. I think college students in reality are the real tip of the spear when it comes to fighting the institutional inequities that we find both on a college campus as well as off of that campus. You got to remember, a college campus doesn't exist by itself. It's just a part of the overall system. When I look at my experience at Western, we had problems as students with housing. We had problems with students in terms of entertainment, where we could even, hold parties. There were, we had problems getting the venues in order to even hold a party. We have problems when I return. Problems in terms of housing as an adult, as a non-student. We have problems integrating, interacting with the overall community. Why is that? I mean, even after you graduate, you're going to be part of some community. And unless we learn now, well, we're going to have the same problems then, that's for sure. So it's important that you expose yourself to as much education, as much learning, as much experience as possible. Okay.
So to the question about from the past up until now, what works, what doesn't work, part of the problem is the way we've been indoctrinated with this individualism that I can do it all by myself. That's not true. But what I've seen work is collaboration, when we work together. And so forget Horatio bootstrap story that I can do it all. No one does anything by themselves. And that's why when I was a part of the Everyone Counts learning community, I wanted to change some of the awards where we were not given individual awards. We should be giving group awards. The university should be encouraging faculty, staff, and student collaborations. They should be encouraging teams of faculty to work together, teams of students to work together. They should have, cohorts for solutions to problems. So yeah, the idea of the hero, the shero, no, I think that's a false narrative. It didn't work in the past and it's not working today.
I think the biggest obstacle in terms of what we're talking about, of what I've seen, and I can, I guess, speak personally, just because I've been inside of the organization for multiple years. Obviously, with the Western Herald, we're taking one that's objective. We're not, I guess, performing these acts of activism, I guess you would call them. When you're at a place for 4 years, you're really only at a place for 1 year, because for 2 years you're trying to get to the place where maybe you have a chance where you can be a leader, right? Man, for 2 years you're going to be doing that, and then the third year you are the leader and you're fresh in. Your friend that you aspired to be your freshman year has graduated, and you want to be them now, and they're graduating. You only really have a couple semesters, and that's really hard when everyone has their own schedule with work, with school. People have families and whatnot. It's hard when it's on a college campus. It's hard when it's off a college campus and you have folks that have been places for 2.5, 4, 5, 10 years even, that try to enact change within organizations. It's hard for them. So it's tremendously difficult with that short time frame, that short window of time.
Yeah. It honestly goes by in a blink of an eye, for sure. But thank you, everybody, for your answers and responses. To our audience, everybody, please keep sending in questions. We are collecting them on the Poll Everywhere link. You can find it right in the little box, little description box. One of our questions that we just received says, to all of the panelists, could you share some of your experiences that you have faced as injustices? I'm sorry. Could you share some of your experiences of injustice that you have faced at your time at WMU? You can go in whichever order.
I'll kick it off since I was the last one, unless you guys go ahead.
I can go. So I've been in a healing process. I've been trying to do racial healing ever since about 2015. No, I'm not reading. Been doing racial healing. So it's a part of that racial healing. I've tried to put all that stuff in the past. I worked so hard to get a master's degree while I was working in the human resources department and apply for promotions, and nope, they just expected me to do everything. They had me doing compensation, employment, benefits, immigration. It was a lot, and no one else at the university could do immigration but me. But they did not want to promote me, and instead they hired a white woman and they asked me to train her, and I refused to. And then I moved to the Walker Institute because of that injustice, and thought, well, I'll go and work in a department that works on injustices, and maybe we can help other people. And I got to that department, and basically the same thing. No promotion, expected to do all of the work, expected to do the administrative work, even though I had a master's degree, expected to serve as an advisor, a student advisor, and do all of the work of an advisor. High expectations. I rose to the occasion until I was just tired of not being valued, not receiving the amount of pay that I should have received with all of my knowledge, all of my experience. So, going through the healing process, you have to kind of unpack all of that and put it away, because the greatest part in changing the world is changing yourself. And so I'm constantly looking at the woman in the mirror and, asking her, what can she do to make tomorrow better, not just for herself, but for everybody else. And so, I feel that there's been a lot of injustices, but it was part of a system. I understand that system, and I know that system is connected to the overall society. So I ain't mad, but like at the end of The Color Purple, she said, until you do right by me, everything you do is gonna fail. That was how I left.
Thank you for that response. You apparently left all of our panelists speechless. Sam, would you like to follow up? I know you had wanted to say something.
I could even speak to my own experiences. I don't really want to do that. And as a journalist, you're going to face things that like directly in front of your face that you just, you can't address. So I've been able to address sometimes. I was living at Western View last, and this is, I guess, might go back to your question of what does social justice look like. But when hearing something, when you say something, right, there's so many opportunities where we maybe diminish ourselves or we shrink ourselves and say, oh, I don't know, I don't want to get myself. It was the beginning of the pandemic, and I hear one of my neighbors, this is in Western View, say some, derogatory thing about, oh, I just passed a Chinese person. And I'm sitting here with my Chinese international student friend sitting right in the room, could hear the same. And I was like, did you just hear that? And he didn't hear it. And I I'm getting frustrated with it. But I walk over and knock on this person's door and say, hey, man, like, it doesn't matter what nationality you are. It's just population density is what transmits this virus. And he's like, oh, man. And I got to know the kid. And this is, guys, like, a guy that's saying this is the same person that would have said, I would have voted for Obama 3 times. These are fairly liberal folks out here causing, saying these just odd things that sometimes we say, well, it's just a remark. It's just no, sometimes you have to address things. But I was going to speak to just, what I've had to report on and dealt with on campus. The folks that are joining us, our guests, probably too young to remember when Western Michigan had a white African-American studies professor use the N-word. Several students felt uncomfortable. He apologized. We had our former track and field head coach. He was with the university for 16 years before he was fired. And our athletic director, who's been here for 20 years, Kathy Beauregard, went on to say that an unhealthy culture that was within his program. Found out we were one of the only publications to report on what actually had happened, and he had asked players not to use the N-word while using the N-word himself. And our athletic department put him on a 10-day suspension. We FOIA'd them, and following the release of the FOIA, he was fired. And, countless numbers of things that the students that are watching this are going to come back and think in their head right now. But I think as students addressing these issues, the most poignant and the most successful kind of responses to these instances are the students that address them head on, and the ones that are knocking on the door like I was, right? To say, hey, like that's not right, that's not okay, right? So.
And to speak after all of these chilling testimonies, I'm fortunate enough to say that I haven't had too much trouble with my professors and interacting with staff. But there are instances. I'm Arabic, so I have a complicated last name, and there's always one professor every year that can't seem to handle it, and then just starts purposely making fun of it. And like that, those interactions that I've had, and like being like, hey, like, no, I don't care. Like, you either say my full name or you don't say it at all. And that kind of like, that's unnerving in a sense. When you're a freshman in college and one of your first interactions with your professor is telling them, hey, stop, I really don't like this. The mindset that you get in when you come to college for any freshman is, oh man, this is going to be great. This is what I've worked so hard for. This is what I've attained for. And so I can go on and better myself. And then you will find professors, faculty, schoolmates, whoever it is that will hit you on these small things that you don't realize, that you do realize or you haven't realized that bother you quite a bit.
Thank you all for sharing those examples. And oh, go ahead, Umar.
Oh, no, I was going to let you go ahead. It's, those aren't the kind of experiences you really want to reminisce about. As a student, and once upon a time, Western Michigan University had an outstanding debate team. I came to Western Michigan University because of its debate team. As a student, and we had a traveling debate team, I should say, to remind or inform you, because I don't think Western has a debate team anymore. Hasn't had one for quite some time, perhaps rightfully so, I don't know. At any rate, as an intercollegiate debater, I experienced any number of things. There wasn't very many African American debaters on the intercollegiate circuit. And so if you know anything about debate, you know it's scored. You have a judge, and the judge can make any type of comment that they want on the particular score sheet. And I received a sufficient number of obviously discriminatory comments. But as a student, trying to even get into various programs, after I returned as a graduate student, I wanted to go on and try to get a doctorate. And I was denied being able to get into the doctoral program that I wanted to, not under the same circumstances as other students. After I became a staff member, just getting the same pay. This is kind of eerie for me because my mentor, when I became an employee at Western Michigan University, was a gentleman by the name of Sam Robinson. And so, having this particular panel with a young man by the name of Sam Robinson is very eerie to me. But he was my mentor. And I can distinctly remember Sam Robinson was the manager of a department with over 120 employees at Western Michigan University. He had a counterpart that ran the same type of department, the very same type of department, in the housing area of Western Michigan University with less than 50 employees. Sam Robinson never made the same amount of money as that person. It's humorous as I look back upon it now, but it's a very sad situation. When I became the director of labor relations, I took that particular position, having both a bachelor's and a master's degree in public administration. My predecessor had only a bachelor's degree, and I never made the same amount of money as that person. Those are subtle things that you're going to face, that you're going to end up having to speak out about. I remember having to file various discrimination charges. Very uncomfortable because you're going to make people feel very uncomfortable. But it's also very necessary. It's in that area that the late John Lewis would call good trouble. Don't be afraid to make waves. And if there's anything that we learn over the years, as we look at ourselves, either in a mirror or otherwise, don't be afraid to make people feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel uncomfortable. Other people are going to feel uncomfortable. But that's the only way that we're really going to get to that level of transparency, that level of truth that's going to be needed in order to make the overall society, let alone the institution, whether that institution be Western Michigan University or whatever endeavor that you're training for right now, that you're getting educated for right now, you're going to meet that head on. Whether it's somebody who's going to refer to COVID-19 as the China virus or Kung flu or whatever ignorant thing that could possibly come out of an ignorant person's mouth, you're going to meet those people head on. Be prepared to make them uncomfortable.
So to that effect of kind of making that discomfort and creating that, one of the questions we got in the chat that I will post to everyone again is, do you feel that it's time for another takeover, another demonstration on campus? How do you know when it is time to do something like that? Or what other direct action do you feel is purposeful on Western's campus at this time?
Understanding that the situations call for direct action when it becomes so intolerable that you really have to kind of rise up. All of you, including Tanya, are perhaps too young to remember one of the things that got a very famous singing group into kind of trouble. That singing group was the Fifth Dimension. Some of you may recall the name, or maybe it's even your favorite group, oldies but goodies. But they sung a song called the Declaration Medley. The Declaration Medley got them in trouble because they sung the Declaration of Independence. And it was at a time when Richard Nixon was the president of the United States. And he was kind of the predecessor to our current administration. He did a lot of the same, or I should say the current administration is doing a lot of the same things that Richard Nixon did. He was a crook. So Richard Nixon didn't want people even thinking about the Declaration of Independence. The incident that triggered our takeover of the Student Center was, of course, the assassination of Dr. King. The incident that triggered the takeover of the administration building was a young lady she was taking a test. The professor accused her of cheating and grabbed her books and notebooks. She pulled them back. He snatched them from her. His wife happened to be a proctor of that particular test. So he grabbed her by the neck and the wife grabbed the books, and it was on from then on. And that triggered the takeover of the administration building. Obviously, Tanya has outlined some of the actions that triggered the lesser degree of fighting the elimination of Africana studies or the elimination of even the Walker Institute as far as that goes. But what dictates an action is often the intolerable action, or that which seems to be intolerable to a number of individuals. Now, I shouldn't say a number of, it can be an individual who inspires others or a group of individuals who inspire others, that this particular act is so intolerable that you've got to act against it. That means that you've got to have something within yourself that triggers that particular emotion, that particular feeling, that this is so intolerable, I've got to do something about it. Now, strategy. I didn't want to take over the same building twice. We had already done the Bernhards, we already done the Student Center. Don't take over the Student Center again. They're going to be looking for that. Straight by the administration building. They weren't looking for that. They weren't looking for a petition to be signed by a group of individuals, alumni, faculty, students, whatever, in terms of petitioning for a, reinstitution of Africana studies. But whatever it is, it's got to be significant enough and strong enough, as Tanya said, to get their attention. Their meaning those people who sit as guardians of the institution. And they're always guardians of the institution, which is another thing you gain by education, because you learn how to examine an institution and find out who those guardians are. You find out, then you know who you've got to tick off. Never be afraid, once more, to tick people off. Okay? And I'm using tick as a, euphemism. You know what I'm saying.
So I would like to add to that, and an egregious act would be what happened to the student who had COVID and passed away. And I was really upset when I read in the paper that the institution disowned him and said, oh, that case of COVID, that happened on the other side, that happened on the east side of the state, as though he was on the east side of the state when he caught it. No, he was in Kalamazoo. He was on this campus. He tried to get help in Kalamazoo. He could not get help, and he died. Now, if that doesn't move people, if that's not an egregious enough act on this administration, then I don't know what else will move students.
I guess I can speak to a little bit. Obviously, we've been seeing before COVID movement that came as a result of our reporting at the Western Herald involving a guest professor from Salisbury University that instructed a choir ensemble of predominantly white performers, students here, and several African-American Black students that were not just attending and in attendance for the performance, but several students that were performing in the event or in the show felt uncomfortable by his explanation of the optics. He was aware that the professor was well aware, and this is an African-American professor that was well aware of students' uncomfortability. After talking on the phone with that professor, who wound up questioning students who felt uncomfortable's mental stability and sanity. He questioned their motives after a video that she posted of his performance went viral on social media. We've seen the student response that led to result of the university saying that we're no longer going to invite this person on campus, but it led to multiple emails from the president and communication back and forth that kind of ended in a stymie a little bit between the Black Student Union and the Office of the President. And I think Tanya put it very, very, very bluntly, and that's, again, I can't speak to any of the ongoing controversies as to not compromise my reporting on some of these stories, but students know what's going on right now on campus. But again, the two things that we do know about this year is not just Bassie, who I worked with, I knew very well. We've already faced 2 deaths as a result, as I said last week, as a result of the current crises that we're facing, which is the coronavirus and then the assumed criminality of Black people by the police. And I'm talking about Bassie Affiong and Jamal Williams. And Bassie died from COVID-19 after he requested a test. That's never been, obviously HIPAA law will prevent us from ever finding out the specifics of that. But that's never been addressed by syndicus. That's never been addressed by the university. Jamal Williams' death, which happened in Indiana in a psychiatric facility. He was unfortunately shot and killed by a retired police officer. The initial police report that came out quoted the retired police officer in saying that, and this is, it's hard for me. I knew Jamal as well. I worked for the football team. but it was a lie. The initial police report that came out immediately following Jamal's death was a lie that had to be, updated into not just the website, the publication that I work for, right? And I'm seeing the subsequent reports come out that indeed he did not. The initial report, I don't even want to repeat it because it's so heinous, was that Jamal grabbed the gun, was reaching for the gun of another officer and shot and killed the other officer on the scene. Whereas evidence comes out later and finds out that one officer indeed shot and killed both his partner and Jamal Williams, a graduate. He was another COVID graduate, I guess you could call it, spring 2020 graduate. He played football at Western Michigan. So, I mean, we do know those two things. And again, we've seen, if you're a student here, you've seen what the Black Student Union is doing. We covered multiple issues like this in the past year. So, yeah, this is it's obviously to the question. It's up to the students, but we've seen plenty that would be palatable to take action and to my perspective.
And I just wanted to mention that direct action cannot be a building anymore. It's got to be virtual. So if you can shut down the system, the electronic system. I'm not even sure what I'm trying to call it, but yeah, I think that would get everyone's attention when they can't send an email, they can't log in for a class because we've been virtually shut down. So that we can consider what has happened and what we need to do to prevent further deaths.
Talking about the subject, especially about Bozy, who was also a friend of mine, it hurts. It's the pain that I'm always going to feel for the rest of my life. Knowing that my friend was taken away way too early, knowing that he had so much potential and he had so much to give to the world. And then after that sadness comes anger. That anger that if he could have gotten that test at Syndicate, if he could have been believed as a Black man, that he was in pain, that he was hurt, that he could still be with us today. And then you look on the news and you see the same thing, the same chants, like I can't breathe, all over our country. And then that takes that chant that's happening in Minnesota, that's happening in New York, and it puts it right in Kalamazoo. And it puts it right into your home. And it turns from something that was happening far away right into your own backyard. And it makes you realize, like, you have to do something. Something has to change. Whether that's changing the administration from the top down, or whether that's finally having the administration listen to students and listen to our cries. Whatever it is, it has to happen soon. It's you see it happening more and more every day. And as a student of color, there's sometimes like I'm very happy that schooling is online because I feel safer. I feel more confident behind my laptop rather than when I'm in person. Whether that be because I do homework better by myself, or whether that is I don't feel that social pressures that are on you at all times. And I think that's something that's also never talked about, is that there's always a social pressure on you as a student of color. Whether you have to act one way, that you don't get the attention of police officers or facility members coming to talk to you. Because that's happened to me. I'm a loud individual, and I'm just talking and having a good time with my friends, and facility members in the student center have come and told me to quiet down or to be quiet or to stop causing a ruckus when I'm just laughing and doing homework with my friends. You know. And then I guess to address the topic, when it comes to knowing when you need to start sit in, you're not gonna know, at least in my opinion. You're not gonna know. Something's gonna happen and it's gonna be a spark to the powder keg that is building. And you just have to depend to see what does it take? Does it take the unfortunate passing of our friends, or does it take something bigger or something smaller? What is it gonna be that tips the dominoes? And in my personal opinion is that you shouldn't even wait until it gets there. If you personally see something or feel a certain way, get in contact with other people. There's always going to be people who feel the same way that you do, who want to do something. But all it takes is one leader, one person to make that first step, and then the ball starts rolling.
I really don't want to advocate for shutting down the EDU because that's how I get on my emails. So short of that, I think some solutions are a statewide vote for WMU trustees, just like U of M, Michigan State, and Wayne State. Those trustees are voted in by the state. Again, no lifetime appointments. How look at your executive board and look at the years of service and what happened when they were in service. Who's controlling? And you always follow the money. Follow the money. Who's controlling the money, or who's controlling the change? The other solution would be to make sure that student government is a part of every decision-making body on the campus. There should definitely be a student who meets with the board of trustees. There should definitely be a student in the president's cabinet, the president's council. There should be a student everywhere representing students and student government, even including the faculty senate. There should be a student in every decision-making body on that campus reporting back to WSA what is being said at the table. When I was in Everyone Counts, we had to do a project at the end. My project, what I wanted to do but was discouraged from doing, was to go to every meeting and take a picture and see who's at the table and post those pictures so that in 5 years, let's take a picture. Who's at the decision-making tables to see if that's changing. But no, I was discouraged from doing that because I was told, well, you can't tell what it's on a person's mind just by how they look on the outside. So I didn't do that project, but I think it's about time somebody did the project. Take pictures of who's at the table making the decisions, and let's see if that can change.
I have to interject here.
Uh-oh.
That's a very good idea. But to quote an age-old and now deceased poetess by the name of Aretha Franklin, ain't no way. They're going to claim privacy issues and whatever. Yes, that should be done, because if you could get a picture of the participants in every meeting, every major decision-making meeting on the campus of Western Michigan University, yes, that would tell you a lot. First thing it would tell you is something that we found out as the Black Caucus. We found out as the Black Caucus in the early 1990s or so at Western Michigan University's campus. We found out that among all of the departments that existed at that time, and there were about 90 of them, that of those 90 departments, none of them had any minority incumbents. These are the departments that run Western Michigan University. Has that changed? I don't think so. But you can easily do that if you could get a hold of the data. What we found out then is that basically we accidentally got a hold of the correct data in terms of institutional research that told us who were the incumbents by sex and race, whatever, to that enviable position. You, as the students at Western Michigan University, provide or have the potential of more than enough votes to actually dominate Kalamazoo city government. You, as Western Michigan University students, have the right to vote. Most students don't vote. Most students don't participate in the electoral process while they're in college, or at least while they're at Western. But you could if you wanted to, or if you could inspire people to. That's very, very significant when it comes to the power structure in this particular area. As Tanya outlined, Board of Trustees probably should be voted in. Again, 18, 19, 20,000 votes. You could actually sway that election as well, because most people don't even know who the trustees of Michigan State or University of Michigan or whatever. Only the people who have that particular interest are subject to vote for that particular individual. Therefore, if the students who know what trustees are or who the trustees are that they want in, they could vote for that trustee. 20,000 votes. That's enough to carry most elections in this state, especially in this part of the state. So you guys have the clout, you got the juice. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to use the juice.
Well, thank you all for your amazing responses and giving us all of your wisdom and knowledge. I think this was a great conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed and feels like they have some takeaways from this, discussion. Just thank you again to the panelists. And
Yeah, I just want to thank all the panelists again for being here. I also want to give a big thank you to the Government Relations Office and everyone at We Talk, especially Margaret von Steinen and Jeff Brenneman, who helped us so much in putting this event together and making it possible. We want to invite all of you watching, especially students, to attend our next Western Student Association meeting. Our next house meeting is coming up this Wednesday, October 7th at 5:30. You can access it from our website. We would love to hear from you and see you there. And if you have any follow-up dialogue, we really appreciate you all sending your comments in the chat. But if you want to get a hold of us as WSA, Dahlia and I's emails will pop up on the screen. So you are going to be able to see those. And please feel free to reach out to us. We want to hear from you as students. We want to support you as the Western Student Association. I also want to give a shout out to an upcoming event from the Lewis Walker Institute. It is coming up. If you go on to Experience WMU, you can sign up. The first 50 students will be able to attend. It's going to be a book read with Sean King. The registration closes on October 9th or when it reaches capacity. So go ahead and go on to Experience WMU to see that. And then finally, the next upcoming We Talk event is on women of color and political influence, which Dahlia will be sitting on that panel along with some other really amazing panelists to talk about voting, which Umar touched on, and I appreciate greatly. So that's going to be on October 8th at 7 p.m. You can access it on the same website where you found this link. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and have a great rest of your evening. We Vote is Western Michigan University's campus-wide nonpartisan effort to ensure that all eligible students are registered to vote. This year, we have partnered with TurboVote to provide you with a comprehensive voting resource. All you have to do is visit wmish.turbovote.org, and the site will guide you from there. We encourage you to get registered, make a voting plan, and vote early to keep yourself safe during this election season while making sure that your voice is heard. If you have any questions about voting or want to get involved with We Vote at Western Michigan University, please visit our website, wmish.edu/vote. We Vote is Western Michigan University.
What are you talking about?
My life is enriched every single time I get to know one of you. My life is better if I can engage in that civil discourse. And civil discourse does require a choice, and it does require practice, and the practice starts with listening.
We always go into uncomfortable dialogue thinking that our viewpoint is right. We're all guilty, right?
If we are able to not necessarily change our minds about other people, but at least speak with them and gain a better understanding of where they're coming from, I think we're much closer to being the country that we want to be.
Because what we're trying to build here is a set of community values and connections between us that will allow us to have conversations, not just this year during political season, but going forward on a whole range of issues.